Hello, everybody, and welcome to another overly informative episode of Two Gays, One Episode. I'm Alex.
And I am GoatJesus.
And what, pray tell, shall we do on this, the day that is today, without dating when we're recording?
We're going to be talking about two episodes, episode 20 and episode 21 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. We're coming close to the end. We're getting there. But we decided to take on two episodes this time because episode 20 is just an Anno mind F, and there is a lot of interesting stuff in it. He was practicing
for End of Evangelion, is what he was doing.
Yeah, he's practicing for EOTV and EOE. So, but at first, before anything, I want to talk about my dream I had last night. So I woke up in a cold sweat because I had a dream that I made a video essay on the rebuild of Evangelion. And Anno commented on the video. He commented in the comment section. And he told me, "You're a pathetic child having wasted your life talking about Evangelion." And then I responded to him, "You're a pathetic man-child who made the worst movies I've ever seen over the course of 2 decades." and then it became this whole flame war. And the whole internet was outraged, and I got like a ton of death threats, and it was crazy. So I dreamed about that last night. I just felt like I wanted to express it for some reason.
Okay. Was I in the dream? Did I flame Anno?
No. No, but you can if you want.
Okay.
We can go to Twitter.
Let's rewrite history. Yeah, I'm sure I'll flame Anno in English, and he'll be like, "Nani?"
But this is an Anno episode 20 was an Anno-centric episode written by Anno exclusively. He didn't have
Anno-centric makes it sound like the episode's about Anno, like he inserted himself into the episode.
No, no, not this time. Not this time. Not this time. But, well, there's a little bit of that going on. We'll talk about that later. Maybe a little Anno in self-insert.
I was joking. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about Shinji's sexual relationship to women and girls, which seems to be very a little more Anno, a little less Shinji, but I guess as a result is Shinji.
What do you know about Anno that I don't?
I know that he was not married for the longest time, had horrible relationships with women, tried to sex up the staff of Evangelion constantly. He was a bit of a... He tried a lot of... He tried to be a ladies' man and was really bad at it. And so had some...
He thought he was Kaji, but he was actually Kensuke.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which I you know, with the rebuild, that has some dark implications when you think about it. Okay.
Aside from the voice actors, is what women worked on Evangelion. I mean, I'm sure there were some, but
it was specifically the voice actors, if I'm aware.
Oh,
he tried to sex up Asuka's voice actor and Rei's.
Not Shinji's.
Allegedly. I'm also not.
Where did you hear this? What are your sources on
alleged.
This?
The voice actors themselves.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
Fair enough.
They basically talked about it, but kind of play it off. They think it's kind of funny in retrospect, which is
like, oh no, he's such a cuck.
There's some theories that Anno was really harsh with Asuka's character in particular because of...
Is that why he didn't want her in the rebuild?
I don't know, but there was some emotions flying around, most likely behind the scenes of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Some personal issues. So Anno is very
Anno.
He has a very difficult relationship with women. I mean, it should tell you a lot that he advertised Ava in part like EOE's. There was an advertisement campaign where he like called up some sex hotlines and talked to some women, and it was just like, I created Neon Genesis Evangelion on camera. He recorded himself doing that, and the women would go like, yeah, that's nice. What is that? Is that a cartoon for children?
The more I find out about Ano, the less I
way.
want to know about him.
He's a bit of an interesting person, but had struggled for a while. Has seemed to have found much inner peace through having his wife be in his life. So that's good at least. So moving on
To this highly sexual, weird, introspective episode that Ano wrote about himself, maybe.
Shinji's trapped inside Unit 1, and that's basically the crux of the episode 20.
Yeah, that's the dramatic question, is can Nerve save Shinji? That's really the episode, what the episode
And the answer is no.
The answer is yes.
Only mommies can do that.
Only mommy can. Oh, true. The answer is, you're right, actually. You're right. The answer is no. They don't save him.
The answer is no. Only mommies can save you.
Yes. Only mommy. Not the highly equipped, full of genius scientists government organization. Your mother has to rescue you.
Yeah. I think that's probably autobiographical as well. Anyway.
Is it? What else do you know about Ano?
Well, after making Nadia's Secret of Blue Water, he did hit up his mom and cry to her for like a couple hours about how badly it went. So maybe he just
how do you know that?
His mom.
Did his mom tweet that?
His mom tweeted that. No, I think it was Ano that said in an interview himself.
He has no shame. He has no shame. There's nothing secret. He's like, yes, I am terrible with women, and I frequently call my mother to cry on the phone and tell her how bad my life is going.
So he wrote this episode solo, and
which is it one of
budget,
two?
Most likely.
I think it's this and 16 he wrote by himself, right? And the pilot. I think
yeah. 16 also has a very trippy vibe going on, so that sort of makes sense. I think he has to take over because he's kind of thinking as a producer in these episodes, being like, okay, we need to save money. We're going to reuse footage. I'm going to write stuff specifically for reusing footage. And so I think that he is stepping in for that as well, to be like thinking as a writer, a director, and a producer all at once with these. Because they reuse a lot of older episode cell animations for episode 16, 20, and EOTV.
Yeah.
Which EOTV, I'm pretty sure he also wrote himself.
He is really smart about it. I do have to say, I actually do respect... I don't think he's the best writer on the show, but I do respect Ano's writing style. I think it's very unique, and I think it's very him, for better or worse. Because a lot of what's cool about it is when you have... Because animation is kind of cyclical, like repetitive, right? Like you see a shot, that shot kind of sticks in your mind when you've seen it like 8 times, right? So having one bit stuck out in my mind where he's imagining Asuka speaking to him, but it's Asuka crawling through the ducks in episode 11 in front of him, and he's remembering that, and she's talking to him, so it almost evokes a certain context, like a memory for him. And it's like that's really what life is a lot of the time you remember people from the things that happened in the past with them, so it's calling back to that while saving money, while kind of it's very avant-garde. I think you told me once it's kind of like you described it, it's probably something more to talk about in episode 22 with the Asuka freak out, but the way using that type of repetition in film is a way to unnerve the audience almost.
Yeah, it is. And
I feel validated.
No, it is. To have a repetition makes it uncomfortable. It is unnerving to kind of see that, insanity by definition is repetition in some ways, like doing the same thing over and over again with no results. And Eva is a story about in part about breaking free from cycles cycles of abuse and trauma
so.
and
True. Yeah. I was thinking of the
it is
rebuild.
like
Anyway, sorry.
No. Forget about the rebuild. NGE was already about breaking free from cyclical behavior and ritualistic patterns of behavior, and that's why we get like the train car coming back a lot of the time, and the eternal summer motif, and how they're kind of stuck in a purgatory, hellish kind of thing going on, but. Rebuild kind of takes that a little more literally, where it's like, okay, literal cycles of the time loops. It's like, okay,
I guess.
Anyway, Shinji's sort of stuck in this kind of weird mind trip out, and the story is structured around the course of many days. So we're taking this episode and we're watching events unfold one day at a time, and we get cuts of what is happening with Misato and the crew, and with Asuka and with Rei in between all of this that is happening, kind of showing how characters are recovering a little bit from episode 19, which was very high production value,
high energy. A lot happened, a lot of high impact stuff happened, I'd say. So this is a low key episode, kind of followed up.
Cooling down. We're cooling down.
Yeah, we need a breather. We've been jogging, we were sprinting in episode 19, and now it's just like, oh, we gotta kind of coast for a bit.
One thing I'm not a huge fan of in this episode is just and this is just a writing technique, I guess, in general, but it's sort of spelling things out for the audience a little bit in some ways. When Shinji's wrapped up in his own mind, he talks about how he does what he's told, and he just kind of does things. And in episode 15, when he talked about the cello and how he just never stopped because nobody told him to, that really demonstrated that he's a character that follows orders a lot of the time and does things to keep his head down and be safe and to please others. And it did it in a way that was less direct than in this episode, where he straight up just tells the camera, like, this is how I feel and this is what my character's about.
A little bit.
It's a little navel gazy for my taste. And then we get like a bunch of Shinji being horny for the female.
A little bit, yeah. Sort of horny, sort of unnerved and afraid of them.
Yes.
Like, he imagines them naked, but he's scared of them. He's like, oh.
They're pretty scary. I mean, they're animated kind of scarily. So.
And you do get the theme, because I think one of the themes, more so in the next episode it comes up, but it's kind of a feminist theme, is the idea that all the women are kind of interchangeable. So you see all three women in the same pose, moving the same way, saying the same thing, and it's like, it's almost this idea that they're all, there's no difference between them, really. They're all just the redhead, the blonde, and the brunette, kind of, almost.
In reality, they're very different from each other.
They're totally different from each other.
Yeah. I feel like Shinji is incapable of seeing, or at least the sexual part of himself is incapable of kind of distinguishing that these are people, and that's sort of a problem in a way, because it's really hard to make connections when you don't understand yourself and you don't understand others as a consequence of it, because how can you understand others if you can't understand yourself? So they're just kind of interchangeable in his mind, and that's not good. I don't think that's a good thing, and I don't think the show is presenting it as a good thing here.
No, certainly not.
Yeah. And then we get some stuff earlier, if you remember, with Asuka, and she's totally kind of emotionally devastated by what happened in the last episode.
She has a freak out. This is kind of the beginning of her decline, I'd say. When she starts to really lose it. I think we already said
we see like this
but this is when
great. We see this great shot of like her room, and it's torn up, and she's been tearing up magazines and kicking shit around the room. She's had like a temper tantrum off screen, which is a technique I really, really like.
Yeah.
About, maybe it's because of the lack of being able to animate it, budget stuff, as we were saying, but as a consequence, you get really genius things like this, where you just have the aftermath.
Yeah, it's almost more unnerving to see the aftermath
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a story that happened off screen here with Asuka's meltdown, and we don't get to see it directly, but we get to see the aftermath. yeah.
What
Go
what
on.
she's saying to Misato is like awful. Like she's like, "Hey, Ray's okay," and Asuka's like, "I don't give a damn if Ray's okay. Why are you calling me and telling me that?" Then she just hangs up on her.
Yeah. She
Ray's
she's
oh, no,
also
Ray's
not like
alive. She's like, "I don't care if she's alive." Good lord.
yeah, and she also is very she doesn't really seem concerned with Shinji in the same way that she used to be. If you
No.
remember in episode 16 where she was listening at the hospital door to see if he was okay, and now she's just so wrapped up in her own problems that it's becoming difficult to even consider other people for her. So
Yeah, she there was like 3 or 4 episodes there where she was really concerned about Shinji because he got injured like 4 times in 2 episodes, but and every
yeah,
time she
yeah.
was there, and now she doesn't care.
Now she's just upset that he upstaged her. Yeah, that she's a failure. She had a solo mission
Yeah,
to prove herself in 19 and failed
I
completely.
think we talked about this, but it's almost. I always get annoyed when people are talking about how like, oh, Asuka never wins a fight on her own. It's like none of them. Do. I think we talked about that in that episode, but none of them win fights on
It's
their
all
own.
very collaborative, and Shinji gets his butt saved by his mommy. That's the funny thing is that he was the real person that upstaged Asuka was his mommy.
Was his
So
mommy? It's
that,
always the
I
mommy.
think that I think that's a pretty amusing in reality. Yeah.
Yes.
Um.
Yeah, yeah, because if you know one is you, yeah, fair enough, yeah, absolutely. Um,
um.
yeah, so that's cool.
And we get some Kaji this episode. We get some Ritsuko, some Misato,
I was
some
gonna
Maya.
say that Ano is like really kind of the way he writes episodes. Like it's almost a perfect compare and contrast if we're doing these 2 episodes at the same time, is because 21 is a Sasakawa episode. Sasakawa is a much more, I think, refined writer. I think he has a stronger skill set than Ano does, whereas Ano, I think, has really interesting ideas, but he doesn't really know how to present them in an interesting way. And so this whole episode is basically just scene, then another scene, then another scene, then another scene, then another scene, and there's no cohesion to it. He's just kind of talking about what he wants you to know about in this story. It's kind of what you're getting at earlier, but where he's just sort of info dumping the plot, and then at the same time he's talking about the emotional issues he wants you to think about. But there's no cohesion.
Yeah.
There's almost no
The only thing that ties them together is that calendar motif, where it's like day 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. It's like
yeah.
pretty much the only thing that sort of binds them together in any way. But they're really disjointed. I totally agree. Nothing is logically built on itself. But it sort of accidentally works, doesn't it? You know, it feels like a mind trip in a lot of ways, and there's a value to that surrealistic lacking of structure, especially in a show like Ava, which is very deeply personal and psychological in some ways. So I think this is weirdly an episode I never skip personally, even though it's strange. And I, speaking fairly, it's not very well. It is very shabby, so it is a very shabby episode. But I would not skip this one because there's a lot of interesting stuff here, intentionally or not.
Yeah, I don't think you can skip anything in Evangelion, really. I think the whole thing is kind of one cohesive book, almost. Like, if you skip a part of it, you kind of lose something, I think. Yeah.
And you do get some plot that's important here because we also finish off with Misato and Ritsuko and Kaji, and Misato and Kaji have this sex scene towards the end, and after Shinji escapes the unit, Yui kind of spits him out, and we kind of get hints that Ritsuko is having an affair of her own with Gendo, and we also get Kaji giving Misato information about the larger happenings going
He's
on.
giving her something else, too, am I right?
Yeah. I like the way that the sex scene is
Multitasking.
shot, by the way. It's a very beautifully directed sex scene in some ways because it's again about the aftermath and it's more of the afterglow of it. And
Yeah.
and the inserts and the just what's happening, what happened, and it's not gratuitous or showy. It's very mature, I think, in the way that it's done. I very much enjoyed the way that Misato and Kaji's scene at the end was handled. Yeah,
for sure.
I don't really
It's their
have much
last
more to
moment
say about this
together.
episode. Do you
It's
have
their last
anything
moment
to
together,
add?
really. I think there's a bit more to talk about, but yeah, just there's like a cool silhouette shot when Ritsuko, Misato, and Maya are talking. I wanted to comment on. I think that's just a really nice little shot. This episode was directed by. I wrote it down. I don't see it in the notes. Oh, here it is. It's Masuhiko Otsuka. I don't know who that is. Do you know who that is?
Oh, no.
Well, he did a good job with Ano's weird script. He did a pretty good job.
Apparently, he worked on Premiere and Gurren Lagann, and
okay, so he's just like
he's a trigger guy now.
Guy. Yeah,
Did some episode directing for BNA and Star Wars Visions and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. There's also the continuing strife between Misato and Ritsuko. Ritsuko kind of comes clean about the Avas to Misato, and she's just kind of talking like a scientist, and then Misato slaps her because she's annoyed because Ritsuko's acting really cold. But then by the end of the episode, they're just kind of chatting in the car, and they kind of make up a bit. So they have a very complicated
Misato slaps Ritsuko a lot, huh?
She does slap her a lot. Misato slaps a lot
More
of people.
than once is a lot.
I think she slaps a lot of people in the show, if I remember correctly.
She's got the hands of a fine woman.
Sure.
They need to be used to slap fine women.
Always off screen. Always with the same sort of shot composition. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about this episode. I think we could go into more detail, but that's all for now. We're going to talk now about episode 21, which is written by my boy, my favorite, Akio Satsukawa.
This one's called Birth of Nerve, and it's
on Netflix called Birth of
largely
Nerve.
told.
The title I always remember is I can't remember the exact phrasing of it. It's like, and thus he realized he was still a child. It's something like that, which is a reference to something Shinji says at the end of the episode, but Shinji doesn't really play into the story otherwise, so it's sort of an odd thing to focus on with the title, but that's fine.
I think it's focused on that because it's contrasting how little he knows versus all this information that we're now given, and a lot of it has to do with Kaji being a super secret agent and dive rolling everywhere and figuring out what's happening. And so this episode's told through the perspective mostly of Fuyutsuki.
So do you think with the title, just to talk about this a bit, do you think that the whole idea is that we're seeing all these things that Shinji has nothing to do with? So it's almost about how Shinji isn't important, kind of, to so much of the lore of the story. I think that's what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, I'm saying Shinji's just this tiny piece of a grand puzzle that he is completely unaware of. That's
what I was thinking too, so I guess we're on the same page.
Yeah. And this is the first instance of a director's cut episode.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
So all the director's cut episodes have cold openings. You don't usually get a cold opening in Evangelion, but all the director's cut episodes have them. This one is super cool. I love the cold opening for this episode. We see, we don't see the whole thing, but we see the little hints of Adam going through and we see like an almost like found footage, like Bigfoot in the wilderness kind of shot of him as he walks into frame, and we just get the scale and the scope and the size of this monster that we'll get more information about as the show goes on, and it's just so cool. I love the cold opening. What do you think of it?
I think it's a really clever cold opening in a lot of ways. I like the feeling that we're watching a tape that we shouldn't be, and there's even the title card at the end. I think that's really cute. It's like, anyone who watches this unauthorized is going to be sent to prison for 50 bajillion years by the United Nations. It's it feels like you're really getting in on a secret of some sort, and I like to be able to see Adam
actually
wreaking havoc on the South Pole base. So yeah.
The whole episode is like found footage, is like this hidden story we didn't know about, and we're getting all this classified information. So good job, Satsukawa. I don't think you wrote the script for the director's cut, but I don't think you wrote any of the director's cut scenes, but good job. Bravo.
And then the actual episode opens up with Kaji at a phone booth, and he's calling Misato.
So it's almost a Kaji story is really what we're getting.
Yeah, we're basketing Kaji as in the opening. Yeah, he's definitely the first character we see, and he's not the character we end on, but he gets ended, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but I mean, really, the ending is about Kaji, even though it ends on Shinji. It's about Kaji. What's happening. So, and I think Satsukawa does that a lot, where he'll say, here's your focal point. He does that in the open. It's usually in his first scene. He'll do that.
He is going on a mission to die, and he's kind of aware of it. He even talks about that this is going to be one last mission, and looks at his nerve ID and sees how red it is and comments that it's like blood. And it's just super hinted that he's going to die, and he knows it, and he's calling Misato to kind of try and have one last conversation with her, but she doesn't pick up. Who longed for the phone calls of others and thus rejected them thusly. So
yes, so those who phone called other people and they weren't home, so they left a message because they desired to talk to them later.
Yes. That should have been the episode title.
That should have been the episode. Every episode of Evangelion should just be the episode 15 format. It's just...
The last episode should have been called "And thusly children were stuck inside their mother's robots and thus escaped them thusly once they were released from their grasps."
A boy decides he does not like instrumentality and thus decides to live a mortal life once again.
Misato is confronted by two nerve agents who are looking for Kaji. People are just generally out for Kaji's blood in this one. So that's the problem, The problem is established that Kaji's in trouble, and then we get these Seele tablets.
Like 4 episodes ago.
Yes, she did warn him about them.
If you keep playing around, someone's going to come and kill you. And he's like, no, I'm fine. It's okay.
Seele, instead of being represented by a bunch of weird-looking, crusty old guys, they're going to be much more intimidating 2001: A Space Odyssey monoliths.
The rest of the series. Did they explain this? You've given me an explanation before, but I don't remember they actually explained this in the show. That they couldn't afford to do the holograms anymore, so they just use these weird 2001: A Space Odyssey monoliths now to represent themselves.
Well, no, I think it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of distrust going on now, and they're even using voice modifiers to disguise their voices. So I don't think they want each other to know who each other are, really, and who's saying what at any point. So it has to do with... It has to just do with...
You told me that
I was mistaken. It wasn't a lie, but... We get the space tablets from 2001 interviewing Fuyutsuki here, and this motivates the flashbacks to 1999, the year of our Lord and Savior, The Matrix 1, the greatest movie ever created. No, I'm just...
Best movie. I've never seen The Matrix, actually.
Good.
But
really? It's actually pretty good. I think you'd like it. The first one's good. The rest of them are not. Matrix 4 has a lot of strange parallels to 3.0 plus 1.0, so... That's interesting.
That's weird. That's just weird.
Yeah.
I do like the little moment where they say, "Are you ready to be interviewed, Professor Fuyutsuki?" And Professor Fuyutsuki's like, "Ah, Professor Fuyutsuki, that takes me back."
Yeah, exactly. Fuyutsuki is a really cool point of view to have chosen, I think.
Yeah, because he's in the know.
Yeah.
But he's not he doesn't have an interesting perspective on anything because he's just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
professor.
Well, Gendo, if it was Gendo's point of view, it would have been far too revealing. There's like a lot of mystery surrounding Gendo and Yui, and so to have those characters be how we view the flashback from it doesn't work as well. Fuyutsuki is also a pretty compelling character in his own right. He has things revealed here that you wouldn't expect him to be so complex, but there's a strange love triangle between him and Yui and Gendo, and it almost feels like he doesn't make a move on Yui because he knows that he's too old for her in some ways. But he loves her. He thinks that she is extremely intelligent. Yeah, and well, she says, "I want to start a family" to him. She confides in that, and he seems to almost take that as like a hint that it's like, oh, can I, is she hitting on me?
You can just call me Daddy, Yui.
Call me Daddy Fuyutsuki, Professor, Doctor. Call me Dr. Daddy.
Call me Professor Daddy.
Yeah.
I think the only characterization we've gotten from Fuyutsuki in the whole show is in Dance Like You Want to Win, where he's like, "This is so embarrassing." That's the limit of the characterization we've gotten with Fuyutsuki. I don't think anything else is really...
After watching this episode and you think back to that one, it really shows how far we've come in the series and how the tone is capable of going in all sorts of different directions.
That's not even normal for back then. That was just like, hey, why don't we make an episode where they play DDR to beat the angel? And they did it. And it was absurd.
So Fuyutsuki didn't know about Yui right away. He had to get introduced to her, and she's a bioengineering student who has some weird thoughts about space aliens from another dimension and and some wacky stuff called the Evangelions and whatever.
What if we made a giant alien monster and transfixed our personalities onto them and then bound them with robot armor? And Fuyutsuki's like, it's a genius idea, Yui. Let's do it.
I'm not convinced on the details, but you've got a really good head on you.
Have you heard about these Dead Sea Scrolls? No, but I'm very intrigued.
That's not what Yui wrote about. She probably wrote about something boring like macrobiology or something.
I'm sure she must have talked about the contact experiment, though. That didn't come up out of nowhere. They weren't just like, what if we did this? I don't know. I don't think they ever really bothered to think of the logistics of a lot of this. They're just like, yeah, they did this thing through science. There's no real there's no thought behind, how did this work?
If you asked
what was she studying?
Write out,
what was Naoka studying even that led them to be experts at Evangelion?
Cloning.
Maybe
it was cloning. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess she studied cloning. I guess.
Cloning is fairly plausible.
Yeah, cloning's a real thing.
Yeah.
The ethics of cloning are what hold us back more than the actual, logistics of cloning things.
So then we get introduced to Gendo, which is really cool because I like seeing Gendo, young Gendo. He's a bit of a whippersnapper. He is weird. He gets into a bar fight, and we're introduced to him. Yui has apparently told Gendo about Fuyutsuki, and so we get introduced from Fuyutsuki's perspective as he's sort of seeing Gendo for the first time. And Gendo doesn't make a good impression. He says straight off the bat that he doesn't even like to be liked, and Fuyutsuki's like, I don't even like you, so that works for me.
There's almost a James Dean quality to Gendo here, which is the weirdest thing I've ever said in my life. Because he's a greasy old man. That's how I think of Gendo is. He's just this dirty scientist who doesn't bathe often, but he's like a suave, suave young guy here. It's so weird.
Yeah, and he's this kind of person that clearly Yui seems to have taken a fondness to. She calls him kawaii in the Japanese, by the way, which is that took me off guard when I was listening to it. She was just like, Gendo's so kawaii, Fuyutsuki.
Gendo wa kawaii desu ne.
And Fuyutsuki's not pleased upon learning that she and him are dating. He seems to, whether as he has feelings for her or as a guardian figure of some sort, he doesn't seem to think it's like a good idea.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah. But Yui runs off with him. She likes the bad boys, is what it is.
I think she likes that he's like weak-willed and she can control him. That's honestly my actual thoughts about why she's attracted to Gendo.
She's like
needy. I like that.
Hey, I want to be a mother, but I don't want to be I want to be a mother, but I still want to be a scientist. So I'm just gonna puppet this man to be the scientist for me while I chill out with my kids. Kind of gets the best of both worlds, to be honest.
Yeah.
So. And then she's just like, I'm gonna like experiment on myself and maybe put myself inside of a robot. It's all good. That's good.
The actual contact experiment scene is so strange. Because it's like Shinji's there, he's like, he's like behind a window, and Gendo's there, and he's like, yes, everything's going swimmingly. And then the experiment happens. What did they expect to happen with the contact experiment is my question.
I think they expected her to come in and then out, like pop in and out or whatever. I don't know.
So there's an implication
but Yui
in
knew
the
that
last
she was
episode.
Gonna be the Ava.
There's an implication in episode 20. We didn't really talk about it, but that I think Ritsuko has a line like, "This happened before, and we couldn't get the person out." And I'm pretty sure she's talking about Yui. I'm pretty sure she's talking about how we couldn't get Yui out of the Evangelion, but Shinji they can get out. So this is almost so is that what happened? Is they expected Yui to be able to merge with the Evangelion and then go, okay, now we're pulling her out and she's going to rematerialize, and that couldn't happen. Okay. Because they're all very upset that she's gone, but it seems like the whole idea.
It seems to be part of her plan that she did get absorbed and stay there permanently. That was her.
And she just didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, she didn't want because they wouldn't have let her do the contact experiment. But she wanted to be able to be the Ava unit. Yeah,
I think that's a valid read on it. So.
And the thing about Gendo that's interesting as well is that he's very much a character that it's like what Shinji would be like in 20 years type of deal, where he's very awkward and
or could be
doesn't know how to interact with people. Yeah, it's a potential. It's a bad route for him basically, but he's got that same sort of thing, and then he becomes codependent on you. He becomes codependent with Yui because she just kind of shows him affection out of nowhere, very strong and very affectionately, and maybe he is puppeted by her.
No, I think she uses him. Yeah,
and this isn't Rebuild, so we don't take into account that sort of stuff that came out 20 years later. But
does Yui do anything in the Rebuild?
She looks like she's having a lot of fun time with Gendo as their Ava units are making love or something. So that's she's having a good time there, I guess.
I don't remember that. But
Gendo there.
Because the fact that the Ava units are their mothers is not even important. They bring it up one time, and then she's like, "Oh my god, my mother's the Ava unit," and then he like has a freak out, and then they just move on. That's it. But anyway,
I mean,
this is the NGE podcast right now, not Rebuild. Yeah,
Gendo has like a whole a speech though, if you remember, where he dumps a lot of his personal backstory onto. We get to see in a situation like this, but not told through the perspective of a side character like Fuyutsuki.
In the Rebuild.
And I don't think that should be taken into account when discussing Neon Genesis and Akio Satsukawa and other writers who are involved.
No.
With this
deal.
He
wasn't.
So.
He was only involved in the first two.
Yeah.
Then I think you got.
So I think it's a fair reading to say that
that Satsukawa saw 2.0 and he was like, "Well, this is nothing like what I wrote," and he just quit. That's my headcanon for what happened with the Rebuild. I have no proof of this.
I think Yui. It's a fair reading to say that she is kind of like a mastermind or like a puppeteer in some ways.
Well, she's kind of cold. She's a really cold person. Um, she
She is.
because Gendo says something like, "Is this really the reality that we're gonna raise our children in?" It's like, oh, this hellish landscape, and she's like, "Anything can be fine if you put a smile on your face." And you're like, this is an odd, strange way of looking at that situation that she was part of creating. Like, oh, we could destroy the world. It's okay. We'll just make the best of it. Is that really sociopathic, like she doesn't care, or is that really positive because she always puts a positive spin on things, I guess is the question.
I mean, this has to do with the larger philosophy of Eva, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's you can make the best out of a bad situation. And in the case of most people, I think that's true. I think there's some nuance there, of course, where it's like people have a really bad time and they can't escape that bad situation. And you can think positively about it. And there are people who do. There are people who are suffering who definitely have a positive spin on life. But it's also, there's some nuance. I think for an everyday living situation, yes, I agree with this philosophy, but I think there are exceptions that you have to actively fight. You can't just perceive things as happy. You have to actively fight for your own ability to be happy.
Yeah.
Like if you're being subjugated or, put down by someone in that way, you have to fight back to be able to earn your happiness. There are exceptions where perspective isn't enough. But yeah, I think with what Yui says, it's like, yes, but addendum notes here. Read these.
Well, I think my own philosophy is in response to this sort of what they're getting at here is that you can make good choices to make your life better. You can make positive choices. You can make bad choices. You can make good choices. You can put positive energy into the world, or you can put negative energy into the world, and generally, what you put out is what you'll get back. Generally
Yes.
speaking,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's right.
That's
So,
not really getting at what like Yui's character though. Do you think she's cold or do you think she's positive? Is kind of the question I was asking.
I think the thing is that, Ray is like a basis for her in a lot of ways. And so Ray like informs her in a strange way. And I do think that she is cold, but has like a heart, good intentions with everything. She is sacrificing the happiness of her husband and her child for what she believes is the greater good ultimately. So
Yeah.
there is a level of coldness there, but also like it is for their happiness and well-being in the long run.
Term.
Yeah. So interesting, but yeah.
And we're not even half done this episode, by the way. There's so much to talk about with this episode.
Yeah. Well, let's keep trucking along. So
Let's keep trucking along. Yeah.
Fuyutsuki is in the South Pole, like kind of seeing all the devastation that's happened because of Second Impact, which happened in 2001, and that's where the Katsuragi like expedition, I believe is what they call it, come into contact with Adam. Essentially a human comes in contact with Adam, or they deliberately triggered Second Impact. Something happened, but essentially
They ran up
began,
and poked Adam with a stick. And was like, "Hey,"
and he exploded.
"Hey," and he was just like, "Whoa!"
Yeah. And Misato survived that ordeal, though her father did not, and she was extremely traumatized, and we get to see glimpses into Misato's past and her trauma. She seems to be going under some sort of psychiatric care for what happened, and it's really interesting seeing how she emerges later in the episode and how she's really well adjusted, and it's almost like a counterpoint to Shinji and his lack of therapy, but Misato managed to come to terms with a lot of her inner demons, at least pretend or be able to put up a front of normalcy for living.
She recovered
in a lot of ways.
She's almost in like a fugue state when they find her, and then she managed to rebuild sort of her. I mean, I think Misato's got her own issues in the show, but like,
she's still got unresolved issues, yes, but she's a functioning adult.
She pulls it back together, even though she was a bit comatose.
And she befriends like Kaji and Ritsuko and all that, and but
and then we get the episode suddenly is from Ritsuko's perspective, by the way. Like
we get Ritsuko with her mother and everything like that, and how
But like
her
Ritsuko's
mother
narrating at one point.
her mother Naoka is jealous of Yui because Naoka wants
How does
to.
Fuyutsuki know all this?
He doesn't. We cut to Ritsuko in
Oh.
the present timeline. Yeah.
Oh, did we? I
Yeah,
missed
yeah.
that. Okay.
I mean, I'm not done talking about Fuyutsuki. We can jump back. Let's jump back to Fuyutsuki a little bit. So he confronts Gendo,
Okay.
who's working for the evil UN, and Gendo shows him like a cavern that's being built underneath Japan, and it matches that of the South Pole, which this cavern has to do with the Black Moon, and so there's like a moon that crashed into the Earth. This is the lore. There's two of them. One's like the White Moon, which harbored Adam, and I think a piece of that split off and landed in Antarctica. Or it is just the White Moon specifically, and then the Black Moon is underneath Japan, and because of course it is, because everything revolves around Japan, and so Fuyutsuki Fuyutsuki's being shown this, and Gendo's like, join me, and we shall be together in our evil ways, and Fuyutsuki confronts him later on, and he throws down all these papers onto his desk, and he's like, explain these. The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Explain this. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the spears of Nebuchadnezzar, the bowls of myrrh.
I'm going to reveal you to the scientific community. They'll be outraged about your
They'll be
mysticism.
outraged by this garbage. Dead Sea Scrolls? Really? There's no empirical value to them. And we get the really hammy,
anyway.
heavy. Sorry.
He ends up joining Gendo anyway.
He ends up joining Gendo anyway. But there's also the really hammy shot of Gendo sitting behind the desk with the cross behind him, the silhouette of the cross.
Yes.
Which interestingly, I think represents not the burden. Because typically you look at the Christ metaphor and it's about like, oh, he carries the sins of humanity. He's carrying them on his back with the cross, and then they hang him up on them. I don't think this represents his burden, because I have trouble understanding what burden Gendo is carrying. I think this is more about I had a good word for it earlier and I don't remember it now, but his regrets, like the
Yui's gone by this point, so he's carrying
absolutely
the burden of her death.
Yeah. The burden or death. I almost think it doesn't represent the burden or the things he's done, but almost the. I had such a good word for it earlier. Shoot. Anyway, the emotional pain, the pain of being on the cross, I think, is what it represents more than the burden of being on the cross.
It's also a great image if you want to convince people to stay away from the show, because it's probably the most pretentious shot of all of Evangelion. So,
watch this show. I swear it's deep. Oh yeah. And that's really the last Fuyutsuki moment in the episode, I think. He's just like,
before Kaji comes to save him in the present time. Yeah.
Yes. And then we get to... Did they do a transition? I didn't actually... There was like 6 versions of this episode. There was like 6 versions of this episode I could have watched, but I didn't. Is there a transition to Ritsuko talking, or is it just...
No, it doesn't really transition. It just cuts, but it does intersperse the present time Ritsuko versus the past timeline Ritsuko.
I guess they just wanted to cover this story, and then they're like, wait, how is he involved in all this stuff? We better figure out a way to tell this story too. Which actually, I think this half of the Naoka stuff is one of my favorite subplots in all of Evangelion. Really, I love Naoka. She's great. The voice in Japanese is good too, but in English is so cool. The original voice, it's just such an interesting voice, because it's kind of deep, but it's also there's a sadness to it, and yeah, I just really like it.
You want to discuss the character and just generally the plotline
of Naoka?
Yeah,
sure. So Naoka, I think, is really interesting, and again we get this sort of feminist message, because she hates Yui because Yui is with Gendo. What is it about Gendo? what do you think women find so attractive about? He's weak-willed. He's kind of a creep. He doesn't really seem to care about anything. He's not charming. There's nothing charming about him. He's smart, I guess. He knows a lot about science. What attracts you to Gendo, Michael?
What attracts me to Gendo is the glasses. Without the glasses, I wouldn't want to bone him, but
Okay.
The glasses change everything.
Is that what Naoka and Yui like about him? Is the reflective quality of his glasses?
Yeah, they see themselves in his reflection. They're just like, dang, I'm hot. Oh my god.
Because there is that scene where Naoka's just like standing across from him, and like Ritsuko's kind of spying on them, and you see Gendo with these giant like grandpa glasses. And he's sitting back in a chair, and she's like, "Hey, I see you put on the sexy glasses I was looking for." Before she starts making out with him. So maybe it is the glasses. Maybe he just puts on these thick giant glasses.
That was the shift. Fuyutsuki didn't like him originally because Gendo wasn't wearing his glasses during the brawl. So
you're right. It all came together once he vision impaired.
And he was wearing his glasses when he convinced him to join him. The glasses are what's doing it. Rei has the glasses because she knows the glasses, the power they have.
The source of his power. Okay. So we also see Ritsuko without blonde hair here, which is kind of cool. She's got her dark hair in the flashback. I totally lost my train of thought because we were talking about Gendo's glasses. I was saying how Naoka is it because the replaceability of women, the interchangeability of women comes up again here because Naoka is having an affair with Gendo, obviously, and she's jealous of Yui because Yui is with Gendo. So there's almost like, oh, women have to fight over men idea that is a little bit contradicted here with her story with Rei as well. I think that makes sense.
It's kind of just like, it's sort of, these characters are crazy. Naoka's crazy. And she is absolutely like absorbed in this way that is not typical, and it's really tragic, like how her caring for this man that doesn't care at all for her, and that's what causes her to snap and kill Rei in the first place, is realizing that Gendo doesn't give a shit about her.
Which I love the way that scene is directed. I love the way that scene is directed.
It goes to show that you shouldn't ever give your heart to a man with glasses, because they
there's a lot more red flags than just the glasses. Well, sure, he doesn't care about me, and he spends all his time at the office, and he's only interested in sex, and he's not a very generous lover, but those glasses. Woo!
We've all had our glasses phase. We've all been through someone with those. So
the ugliest glasses too.
The uglier, the better. Honestly, the more power they contain.
Okay, I'm gonna say I really like the scene where Naoka confronts Rei, and there's a lot of really good directing here. Like when Rei says "old hag" and everything just pauses for a moment, and Naoka's like, "What did you just say?" Like she almost has to do a double take. That Rei called her an old hag. It's also shocking to the audience though, because A, we don't know that this Rei is gonna die. We just think it's Rei, and B, that Rei would talk like that. Like Rei too would not speak like disrespectfully like that to anybody, even someone she doesn't like. So it's interesting how all the Reis, even though they're the same person, they all have different personalities. Like Rei 1, Rei 2, and Rei 3 are all very different from each other.
Yes.
And then there's the silhouette when she finally does strangle her. And as we were talking about with sort of like showing the aftermath of a scene, we see the chalk outline of Naoka after she's...
Which is not accurate. They don't do that in real life. Contaminates a scene of a crime.
Maybe Sherlock Holmes was investigating her death and thought it might be...
Yeah, they did that in like the 1910s or something, the chalk outline stuff, and it just never went away.
Investigating Naoka's death, and he's like, I think the dead 6-year-old girl that was up there might have pushed her over. Just a really bad investigator.
Well, this angle over here tells us that that the 6-year-old girl was the one to blame, but she killed herself tragically.
She tragically murdered herself several minutes before Naoka fell to her
Before
death.
pushing her off. The thing is, she needed to cover up the crime, so it was best to
So
actually
she
kill herself
preemptively
first.
strangled herself.
And then, while strangling herself, knocked her over, and
It's very sad. We're making jokes about a woman killing herself because she feels inadequate because of this stupid man who doesn't have any emotional intelligence whatsoever, but every woman who meets him wants him for some reason.
he's just so,
He's such a bad father, too.
we just love loser men that are
I just
extremely...
love this surly, unwashed man with his beard who looks a lot like the
greasy
creator of the
Severus
show.
Snape. It's kind of true. Like, if anyone's a self-insert, it's probably...
Well, Gendo's the one who looks like Ano.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's a self-insert, it's probably Gendo. So...
This super intelligent man who's pulling all the strings and gets all the babes.
Did you? Okay, I have another Ano story. This one's interesting.
Okay,
So
go
in
on.
an interview, I think in 1997, he said in a magazine that he considers all animators autistic. He said the words autistic, and he
Did he say the
said,
English word autistic or the Japanese
He
word
said
for
the
autistic?
Japanese word for autistic.
Okay.
But I think the Japanese word is like autistikuru or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so
Okay.
anyway,
I've heard that Japan uses that word a lot, though, for a lot of different things. So maybe there's something weird going on in Japan back then.
I don't know, but I think there is a strong argument to be made, and a lot of people consider this, like, Ano himself is someone who has autism. That's, like,
What?
unironic. Like, he's a...
Gendo, actually, does have elements. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor, but there are things about him that make me think of people who are neurodivergent.
And this is not an insult, by the way. Some of the smartest and most brilliant people and most kind and, like, socially, like, they're not socially inept, people I know are, like, autistic. Like, one of my best friends is. And so this is not a dunk, but it does make it
That's what I'm
harder
getting at
to...
is- And we're not doctors. Again,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
not
yeah.
doctors. We can't say, like, oh yeah, he shows.
It does make it harder to socialize with autism without, like, having recognized it and are able to cope with it. And so it's like there's a strong argument to be made that Gendo is probably autistic. Maybe Ano himself was. Maybe he was, like, inserting those kinds of qualities because Ano has always had such a hard time socially is one thing, and him bringing up that animators have autism frequently maybe is a way of keying in other people that he might also have been diagnosed with that. So
Or it's just more random Ano nonsense. Who knows?
But it definitely aligns with the the characters and stuff. If you're having a hard time connecting with people and the themes of the show largely as well, that could be a bent that isn't maybe intentional. I don't know. So moving on from autistic representation in Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I don't know. There's a lot of autistic representation in Evangelion, but yeah. We have then there's another shot here. So we finish the flashback section, and we get to Kaji, and then they had to change something here for the director's cut because the way they shot it made it look like Misato was the one who killed Kaji, which makes no sense. But people
that's
thought that.
definitely not the intention. Yeah.
No, but there's, in the original cut of the episode, there like he gets shot, and then we immediately cut to Misato doing something or something like that. So everyone thought, "Oh, Misato shot him," because I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was even so much so that I believe the ADV dub decided to replace the slap or like a gunshot sound with a slapping sound or something. It was very confusing.
What? I don't remember that.
There's a controversy between the ADV dub and the Japanese where the ADV dub decided to replace the gunshot with Kaji with a slapping sound effect.
What? So Misato slapped Kaji to death and then cried because he was dead?
I'm not really sure like about it's a very strange piece of trivia, but it confused a lot of people. So.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, Kaji's last scene, he smiles, he goes out with a smile and probably a forward roll.
He dive rolled all the way into heaven.
He dive rolled into heaven. Dive rolled into the bullet that took his life.
He dive rolled into this factory with the fan wherever he is. He dive rolled into the bullet.
Where is he?
He dive rolled into the afterlife. He dive rolled into life again, into the rebuild of Evangelion, and then dive rolled back out of the rebuild by dive rolling out of a helicopter.
He became besties with Kaoru for some reason.
He dive rolled into a relationship with Kaoru, and then dive rolled out of a helicopter to stop third impact somehow, fourth impact somehow. And then dive rolled into heaven again.
I think we've lost the story of Evangelion. We've ruined Evangelion for ourselves. Dive rolling.
It's all connected. It's all connected. And the glasses have everything to do with it.
Glasses and the dive rolling. God. Okay, and then we have our final scene where Misato checks her answering machine and there's a message from Kaji. And when we watched this the first time, I guess I wasn't paying attention and I was like, why is Misato crying? And you were like, because Kaji's dead, Alex. And I was like, oh, I missed that somehow.
How did you miss it?
I don't know how I missed it. We did watch like 16 episodes in a row in my defense. I might have just been burnt out. My brain might have just been fried after watching 16 episodes of Evangelion in one night.
Weirdly, that tends to be what happens when I try to show it to people. We end up binging the whole show.
Yeah, so she's crying. She's upset. Kaji's dead. It's really sad because Kaji's actually one of the most, probably one of the only well-adjusted, likable characters in the whole show. The most well-adjusted, likable character in the whole show, maybe, despite being hugely problematic and
he was one of the chillest womanizers.
In every episode he's in, maybe.
Yeah, but he's one of the chillest womanizers I've ever seen in anything.
It is also true that he respects women, like, ultimately.
Yeah.
He behaves inappropriately, but he does, like, he really cares about Misato and respects her well-being, and he doesn't.
I think it's always been an act. It's just
an act. It's just a joke almost. Yeah. Anyway.
Whether it's to throw nerve off or whether it's to freak out Misato. But yeah.
Yeah.
He will be missed.
He will be missed. Yeah, I don't think he even, like, there's no flashback with him or anything after this either. I think he's just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
great episode though. Great episode. Love episode 21.
I just realized, is Kaji a millennial?
Well, if he's a millennial, Misato's a millennial, and Ritsuko's a millennial. How old? They're 29.
What?
They were 29 in 2014. So
29.
They're
a
little older than me. I don't think they're Gen Xers. Yeah, they're millennials.
Whoa, that's weird. Okay,
this is weird.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's because the show aired was not when the show takes place. So yeah, they're millennials. I'm not sure why that's important, but
it's not important at all. Shinji realizes that Kaji's
I mean,
dead
also
and he can't,
the other proof of that. Quickly, the other proof of that
grief.
is that we do see there is a scene where all three of them eat avocado toast and then pop a Tide Pod immediately afterward. It's a weird scene, but
I forgot about that one. Oh
yeah.
My god, that's like one of the most iconic in the show, actually.
And then don't buy houses. They can't afford a house.
They can't afford it.
That's why
Kaji
Misato
actually.
has so many roommates. She has to live with Shinji and Asuka. She
There
can't
was a
afford.
twist. Kaji actually passed away from the after effects of eating Tide Pods before he was shot. He died a merciful death where
This is such a good episode, and we've like disgraced it with our stupid jokes.
it is a good episode. I really like it.
It's a great episode. Top 5 for me, I think.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But yeah.
You were saying something about Shinji, and I interrupted you to talk about Tide
I
Pods.
was just saying that the Shinji longed to cheer up Misato's thusly, but could not, and so thusly put their faces into the pillow.
I think thus he realized he was still a child is actually a pretty iconic title. It's on the level of those women long for the touch of others and thus invited their kisses. It's similarly overwritten and stupid in in the same way. I appreciate them though. I think they're cool titles, even though they're really dumb.
My favorite title in the whole series actually is The Beast That Shouted I at the Heart of the World. I think that's such a
It's poetry.
Such a good title.
It's one-line poetry.
That's the final episode 26 is called that, but yeah.
Yeah, the movie or the TV version?
The TV show. It's
cool.
the reason why it says I at the heart of the world is because it's a pun on the Japanese word for love as well, like I, like AI. So
okay.
yeah. But also it's love thyself. That's what the title means basically, because it is both I and love at the same time. So it's so clever.
Yourself. How the hell are you gonna love somebody else? And that's what RuPaul said to Shinji. And then Shinji went, "You're right," and then he loved himself.
But anyway,
only black character in Evangelion, RuPaul. I'm getting very silly.
I'm not even sure if that's true. I think one of the Sele members is black. But
Are they? I don't think so.
yeah, I'm almost sure one of them is. I'm like,
I think they're
95% sure.
The Willy. I think some of the Willy characters are black, but I don't think one of the Sealy guys is black.
I will show you a picture after we wrap this up. So, but
Okay.
anyway,
It doesn't
you
really
guys
matter.
have a good, yeah, representation.
Strong representation.
Sele member number 12.
Number 5, who has no
Yeah.
dialogue. Good job. Not that there's a lot of white characters who talk in Evangelion either, or Spanish. This is just Japanese people. They're the only ones who matter. I guess Keel's white. I don't know.
Gentlemen, anyway, thank you all for listening. This has been our podcast on episodes 20 and 21, and we'll see you guys in another 2 weeks for episode 22, one of our other favorite episodes of the show.
I think the rest are it's just hit after hit after hit after this. And if you did enjoy this episode, despite its silliness, or perhaps because of its silliness, and if you did enjoy this episode, despite the silliness, or maybe because of the silliness, then subscribe to us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/grandrose. We upload a bonus episode with every release on Thursdays. And this week we are doing a review of the first 20th Century Boys live action movie from 2008 by the manga writer Naoki Uruasawa, who's one of my favorites. So check that out.
You have a good one. Bye.